go here. I think this is so good for us to talk about. I don't know when I got into this, y'all, but well, I do know when. In 2001, I became the head coach in Mason, Texas. It's in the hill country and it's beautiful, except for the athletes. One of my coaches was, I believe, 70. He might not have been that old, but he was old. His name, when he coached, it took him forever. And Mike, this might be what you're talking about. When the linebackers were an individual drill, I wish so bad I would have videoed this. Of their 15 minutes of Indy, Lou talked 7.5 minutes of it. Is that sort of where you're wanting to go on this?
Yeah, 100%. Because like the Nick Saban thing, I was trying to get better at meetings, and then I was like, okay, how can we push time? Like when I'm presenting, how can I simplify that? Like in endo, how much time am I coaching and actually like getting work? And so yeah, that's basically where I kind of been trying to dive deep into.
Okay, so here's what I used to tell my coaches every July was I think the big thing is, and you have to use phrases instead of sentences when you're coaching. And so this is what I would tell my guys in July. Hey, I don't know what your phrases are. I don't care. But instead of you saying, hey, Jimmy, I need you to lateral step, get some depth, put your foot around Tommy, gallop, overlap, and I want y'all to become where he's been coaching this all year. He'd say, hey, Tommy, I need you to move lateral, get behind Jimmy. I need your kneecap to go inside his kneecap. And y'all going to be like a three-legged sack race. And that you're going to gallop together with an overlap fashion. When all he should say is, hey, Tommy, get your overlap. I'm probably just totally, but overlap has to be a term. And all you ought to be able to say to Tommy is overlap. And you shouldn't have to say anything else. So how many terms so here's what I would challenge my coaches, Mike. How many terms like overlap can they come up with for their individual coaching? Because Tommy, overlap ought to be enough. Now, maybe you got to tell him why he didn't overlap. Hey, Tommy, get some more depth on your overlap. But it's almost like that 5-word formation and play thing. I mean, if it takes you more than 6 words to correct a normal technique, so challenge your position coaches. What are your everyday technique drills? One of them's overlap if you're the O-line coach or whatever it is. Make sure you have the title of it, and can you say it in 6 words? Thoughts by anybody on that?
I love it.
So let's come up with, y'all, because overlap's an easy one. Let's come up with receiver. What should be your headlines might be a great way my brain works. Overlap's a headline. We don't need to read the article. So what would be some other headline?
ATM for receivers.
Yeah. One decision, one direction. One decision, ATM. What would you call, y'all? What would the headline be for don't put your hands out until the last possible moment? You know how some kids will run like this and they get slow?
Late hands.
Late hands. Perfect. So your headlines have to be 2 words or less. This is so fun, y'all, because we're just totally inventing something. So we're going to do individual headlines, and they got to be 2 words or less. How many headlines?
I would even say like you could have abbreviations. So like because ATM is not obviously like it's letters. So that technically is 3 words, but you simplified it to 3 letters so you can say it faster.
Yeah, I agree. 1 knee equals 2 feet. So an acronym is the equivalent to 2 words. So ATM, one decision, track meet.
So we do this for my pad level, screws under screws. So I want my helmet screws under their screws.
So to me, that headline, though, I think if I just said screws, they would know. And again, I love this is right up my alley because this was very passionate for me. Blue Holt in 2001 almost made me call I don't know. I was going to say suicide hotline, but I shouldn't say that. But you have to use headlines, and screws is better than screws under screws if they know what it means, and they should. But I bet every position coach should be able to come up with 8 headlines. Y'all, again, I want this to be a discussion. How many headlines? I mean, what do y'all think? A plus or minus 8?
I think the less you can do, the better.
I think it's as many as you need, right? And then look and see if you can condense it even further. I agree with Mike.
Yeah.
But it's as many as you need. It's like if you said, well, you should only have 5 headlines. Well, if you need 6, then have 6 headlines. Like you got to get it coached. But I mean, if you're reducing it down to a catchphrase, you're probably be in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
You know, like especially for the really basic stuff. When we would go up and lucky to live in New England, right? For some things like Dante Scarnecchia was the guy. And, when I would go meet with Dante and he would just say, you got to paint pictures with your words.
Mm.
Because whatever you do, you got to paint pictures with your words. And so like his thing was like, you didn't want the guys to get their feet too high off the ground. He'd say, you got to cut grass with your feet. My guys can understand that.
Oh yeah. And
so, I would always be like, you got to cut grass over there. He'd have things like, one term that I use is like, you want to stab the guy with your hand. And then like the guys had all these things, like my players would come up with stuff and they said, well, it's not a stab, coach. It's like a shank. I'm like, when did you go to prison? But, so we had a term and it was like, you got to shank them. Okay. There you go.
Headline. And
I think you can bring that to your players and let them get involved with like some of the stuff that they understand.
I love it.
Because if you said, what would make sense to you, Bobby? Well, if you said shank him, coach, I'd get it. All right, we're going to shank him. It was funny. I was just texting with one of my guys that's down on a cutter down in Pensacola, Florida on the Narwhal. And he wants to get back to the academy for an assignment because he wants to coach football. And he's a great guy. But he was a guy that, like, technically, he would kind of go off the reservation a little bit. He was in my first year here. And so anytime the guys go a little bit off the reservation, or I have a term now where they can kind of work to the far linebacker on a power play, it's like when the backside linebacker's 3 gaps removed and he's not a fast flow guy, I tell the guys, hey, you can Munson that, because his name was Jake Munson. Because Munson would like go off the reservation with his technique. And so I'd say, hey, Munson that. And the guys understand that means I can just kind of drive down inside and go for that backside linebacker and not worry about him coming over the top. So, like, all those things develop within your own program. So don't be afraid to ask the players because it's what they're going to understand. Like our guys, I'll say Munson, and the guys would laugh because they knew exactly what it meant.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to make this into a film room. This will be a great 10-minute thing that we've been talking about. You can't talk too long. If you're going to talk, I got to take my coach's name out of this. But if you're going to be an old coach, and usually it's an old coach who loves to hear himself talk, and I think that's practices used to be 3.5 hours, and coaches talk forever. And now practice ought to be an hour and a half, and we're going to use headlines instead of speaking in articles. And this would be a great topic for Sports U too, is let's create some fast and wide headline. But JB's point of let your players do it and all, but just getting people thinking about headlines is really neat. And there might be a better term than headlines, but my coach in Mason, Texas, he would speak in magazine articles. It wasn't even newspaper articles. And players were just standing and watching, and no one's getting better standing and watching.
When I was playing football many, many years ago, our offensive line coach had 2 that just now ring a bell, but he always called her Roy Rogers block. He's like, when Roy Rogers is chasing the Indians, he doesn't just follow them. He heads them off at the pass. They go around the mountain. He goes over the mountain. You got to do a Roy Rogers block, And so when we were going to cut off, we had to go head them off at the pass.
Yeah.
So he would just say, hey, it's a Roy Rogers block, which everybody knew what that was, so.
And then, so many years ago, right? So
yeah. Oh, yeah. The kids now wouldn't know what a Roy Rogers block is unless I explained it.
But,
But
when you're 75, you'll remember Roy Rogers block.
oh yeah,
That's
oh,
what
yeah,
a
for sure.
headline. That's a great definition of a headline. Will they remember it 30 years later? All right, give us your other one.
The other one was Chase the Chicken, which is the same. It was a different O-line coach. I was coaching at the time, but it was the same thing. For a cutoff, he called it Chase the Chicken. He's like, when you're in the pen trying to catch the chicken, if you start chasing them all, you won't catch any of them. You got to go. You got to head in a straight line to corner it, and you just go head it off. So he called it the Chase the Chicken block.
I would say it's kind of like when you're presenting, like and you have a slideshow. How many people you see read every single thing like that's wrote out? Like they read everything, or a person that just has like a bullet point and then they explain the bullet point.